Hello everyone, welcome to the Deification and Supremacy Tournament. This is Division 3, and in this tournament we have rulers, Buddhas, messiahs, and Mahdis. And of course this was set up originally in the Division 1 video, which is available. And I have a playlist for this tournament, and it's also, just in the videos available on the channel as well. And I am going to scroll through Division 1 and Division 2 profiles as I normally do, and just talk about the future of this tournament series a little bit. So I kind of have big plans for this. I'm thinking, like almost a celebrity death match sort of thing, probably more game show type thing. Not the full on, violent, decapitation and whatever sort of things with the claymation and all that, but maybe incorporate some of those elements just to make it, a little more fun, a little more interesting and engaging, is the word I would probably use. But that is just kind of the idea for the future. Right now, I'm really just kind of setting it up, and so I've created all these profiles, and I'm just kind of playing with it. I'm learning as I go, making it up as I go. And we're just going to see what it comes out at. I plan on, because what I realized with these tournaments, these characters are never going to change. We're talking about history. So the plan is to kind of redo the tournaments, possibly update them if there's changes in the world, because I do go all the way into current events, the end of this tournament is going to end in North Korea because it turns out even today we still deify our rulers in some cases. And of course, if you watched the end of the Jesus tournament, there is certainly no shortage of Jesuses. Right now there's 21 people alive today, at least, that consider themselves to be Jesus. So that is where this all came out of, and we are going to continue in that. And at the beginning here of Division 3, let me pull up the bracket here so that we can know where we are at. So Muhammad was the winner out of Division 2. No surprise there. He was, like I said in that video, like really the only major heavyweight in this division. Division 1, of course, ended with Cyrus the Great versus Jesus in the Elite 8. So that is going to be saved for the finals video. Division 1 was just packed full of these heavy contenders, tournament favorites, almost all of them. But I narrowed it down to those two, and that's mainly not so much the historical, but of course that's a major part of it, but mainly because of current events. Is what my thinking was there. So I do want to explore that a little more in the finals video. But let's get to Division 3. I'm going to zoom in, which I forgot to do in the Division 2 video. Division 2 had all sorts of problems. I was having audio problems. I forgot to zoom in. So like I said, I'm just kind of learning with this whole series. It's going to be fine-tuned as I go, but I'm enjoying it, and I like the content. I think it's interesting and helpful So I am going to keep on going with it and hopefully make it, more engaging to watch in the future. But right now it is what it is. So continuing with the format that I have been kind of going with, I'm going to take these first two matchups. We're going to look at the profiles and then kind of make a decision on the fly and fill out the bracket that way. So, first two matchups, we have the Dalai Lamas versus the Inca Emperors. And then we have most likely another Mahdi here with Muhammad Juanpuri. Like I said, some of these I'm not going to know how to pronounce these, so bear with me on that as well. A lot of these guys, you do the profile once and then they're out of the tournament, especially with these more obscure figures from history. And this next guy, so Muhammad versus Nurhasi, no clue. But that is okay. Pronunciation, that will come with time as well, I expect. We can at least make a goal. So let's begin with the Dalai Lamas. And I think most of us are familiar with them. But they are on this list because they are believed to be, an incarnation of the Buddha or the Bodhisattva, which is basically like on the Buddha path. So maybe they are not completely considered to be the Maitreya or the living Buddha, but they are at least considered to be on that path, or the closest that in this time, or at that time of their lives. This is a long tradition. So from 1391 to now, this is even currently believed in some parts of the world, mainly Tibet, as you can see here. But they are, considered incarnations of the Buddha, benevolent rulers. So we have as early as Tibetan kings and emperors. Lineage has been extrapolated by Tibetans up to and including the Dalai Lamas. So, unfortunately, in this style of tournament, they are probably not going to fare well, even though they do have a long tradition. As far as the deification and supremacy factor, they're not going to be a heavy contender, I feel. They are facing off against the Incan emperors. And the history here is a little kind of missing. Of course, when they were conquered by the Spanish, a lot of that history was erased, sort of filtered out, I guess, might be a way to say it. But at the height of the Incan Empire, they were, as it says here, they had a status similar to the pharaohs of Egypt. So the emperor was deified, both in actions and emblems, carried the scepter, sat on a golden throne, all the things that you sort of think like the stereotypical deified ruler type thing. It was, part of their military tradition as well. Religious ceremonies was accompanied by the sacred white sacred flame. Okay, apparently it's doubly sacred. the Napa, covered with a red blanket and adorned with golden earrings. Textiles show their status and wealth, all this stuff. And the Inca Empire was the dominant empire in the South American region. So I think we have a pretty strong contender here. I can already tell you I will be choosing the Incan emperors over the Dalai Lamas. So let's move on to the second matchup. We have a Islamic Mahdi, the Islamic prophet, claimed to be the Mahdi 3 times on 3 different occasions. Because it turns out he was mostly ignored, especially by the elite in the Islamic world at that time. His lifetime was from 1443 to 1505. As many as 750,000 followers, so that is not insignificant. Like I said, he was mostly ignored by the elite. So he, at the age of 53, when he had his pilgrimage to Mecca, as you do if you are Muslim. So the Kaaba is that big, the big rock that they almost do like a mosh pit around kind of type thing. He declared he was the promised Mahdi, generally ignored, as I said. Returned to India where he proclaimed Mahdi again. And he did later, I'm assuming this is probably the village where he ended up. But he did have a significant following, and they continue to exist. So that is going to play in his favor always when they extend their influence into modern times, into the present day. That raises their profile in my eyes. And as always, you can contest my decisions in the comments. I have no problem with dissenting opinions at all. Like I said, I will probably be redoing these tournaments for 2021. So this will all be revisited. And as new information or more data comes to light, obviously the decisions can change. I'm also thinking of switching up the order. Right now I'm doing it in basically chronological order. So I may switch that up, like draw names out of a hat or something. But he is facing off against another Buddha contender. We have Emperor, I'm going to say Emperor Tazu instead of trying to pronounce this Nurasi. Founder and leader of the Jin dynasty, later the Qing dynasty. Qin? Not really sure of the pronunciation on that. Granted title by the Mongols, granted title of Khan by the Mongols, so that plays in his favor. Of course, he was believed to be the manifestation of the Manjurishi Bodhisattva. Man, these Eastern names are just impossible to pronounce for my English tongue. Definitely have to practice this to get this right. Khan of later Jin, like I said, he ruled for about 10 years until his death. So he's the founding of the military tradition of the 8 houses. This is the unification of several tribes here, and pretty diverse, I would say. Mongols, Chinese, some other lesser known tribes. So he is part of the folk heritage in Korean, or oh yeah, I remember this. Okay, so this was an this was a pretty interesting one. So on his path to deifying himself, establishing this dynasty, he ended up kind of claiming the folk heritage from Korean, and they just sort of incorporated this into his own tribal heritage and tradition. So this is one instance in history where we can actually see the creation of the folklore in real time, because they were actively creating their own clan, their own family lineage. This was to prevent other claims from existing members of the clan, or whatever, extended family or whatever, from making that same claim as emperor of the dynasty. And this is the link for the book that was the source for that information. So I will throw that up on the description. So this one is kind of tough. This matchup is gonna be a little difficult because these are both pretty interesting, actually, but I think I'm gonna go with this guy. He did found his own dynasty. Unfortunately, I don't have numbers for followers on him, so I don't know how that stacks up against this guy's 200 to 750,000 followers. So that, again, that's data that could be filled in more detail in future tournaments. But for now, I am going to go ahead and go with the Incan Emperors for the first matchup, and this Narasi. I already forgot what his emperor name was. So I'm going to assume I'm pronouncing that correctly. And then here, it's unclear. But I do have kind of a bias toward the Incans, so I'm just going to go ahead and give it to them. So the Buddha falls again. The Buddhas in this tournament have not fared very well. They seem to keep getting matched up with some difficult contenders. But now we are going to move on to the second matchups, and we are getting into the Jewish messiahs are about to pop up out of nowhere, and we are going to have just a string of them, beginning with Sabbatai Zevi. He made an appearance in my Cult and Cultish video, which kind of started this whole tournament series. That's part 20 of the History of Reality 101 series. He was famous for claiming that the world was going to end. He made 2 such predictions. Of course, both of them ended up being false. And he did renounce his claim to the Jewish Messiah, and he ended up converting to Islam. And of course, that was in response to it's like, hey, either convert to Islam or we're going to execute you. That was basically his ultimatum there. So he made the choice of self-preservation. But he is facing off against another Mahdi, Ahmed bin Abi Mahali. He was a Sufi leader of a revolt. And of course, that is the Islamic mystics, the Sufi sect. His revolt lasted about 3 years until his death. Born in 1559 from the south of Morocco. The author of many books, of which only 6 remain today. So he's sort of a religious scholar as well. He did proclaim himself to be the Mahdi. So Morocco was in a state of civil war, and oh yeah, so this not only was it in a state of civil war, uh, they had a pandemic, the plague pandemic, which left a third of the country dead. So he inherited the rule, and he had, I mean, it was just one thing after another for this guy. So his brother takes the northern half of the country, or no, brother takes the southern half. We have this other leader takes the northern half. He had a couple warlords. And then he was also being attacked by the Spanish. The Spanish even came in, Spanish privateers, and they sacked the library, stole all these manuscripts. So he had a pretty rough time. That is not going to play well into his claims of, Mahdi, as far as the deification and as far as the supremacy part is concerned. And he's facing off against Sabbatai Zevi, which I've already basically explained and set up. He still has followers today. So that does play into his favor a little bit. So, like I said, he had 2 false claims about the end of the world. A huge proponent of millenarianism. And of course, so yeah, the year 1666 that had like some supernatural prominence at the time. Not sure how that plays into, the idea of 1,000 years to the end of the world, which is this millenarianism. That is a hard word to say. But needless to say, he, all of his claims ended up to be false. So he was big into Kabbalah, which is kind of the Jewish mysticism tradition. I covered that in the Luciferianism video as part of the left hand. Because a lot of times that mysticism stuff gets lumped into, so the left hand path kind of type mindset. Let's see, is that 2 already, or is that the first 2? So let's move on. Jacob Querido. Yeah, let's just go with Jacob. Like I said, there's a string of these Jewish messiahs now. They are mainly going to be following Sabbatai Zevi. There's like 4 of them in a row here. Attracted considerable following of his own. So he ends up creating his own sect. Lived only 40 years. Died on his way back from Mecca. Led his disciples on a pilgrimage to Mecca. So this is interesting. This is Islam is clearly having an influence on the Jewish tradition at the time. Not a huge surprise, since they were, they controlled much of that area at the time after the creation of Islam. Son of Joseph the philosopher and brother of Jochebed, Sabbatai Zevi's last wife. So, very close ties with Sabbatai Zevi. Then we have another Sabbatai Zevi-esque Jewish Messiah claimant. Another successor, as it says here, author of many Kabbalistic and polemical works. Some of these words that you don't come across very often. Difficult to say. Lived 76 years, so a nice long life for this man. In 1703, settled in Cairo, became a physician. 3 years later, he was assassinated by his nephew during a discussion of money. Anything else that I'm missing in here? Trying to lead people astray by his prophecies and visions. Yeah, not a real strong contender here. Actually, both of these guys are kind of obscure. None of the successors of Sabbatai Zevi really reached his level of notoriety. So I'm not even really sure what to do on that one. I think since Sabbatai Zevi has such a big influence, and his legacy still continues today, I'm going to go with him on that one. On this one, I'm not really sure. I think I'm going to go with the guy that lived the longest. Even though he was assassinated over a money dispute, I think I'll go with that. And then, of course, here I have to go with the first. And then I'm going to take this all the way out to the Elite Eight and give this again to the Incan emperors. Being the dominant culture in that area and for such a long time, I think that makes the most sense there. Even though Sabbatai Zevi does still have a influence today, I do feel that the Incan Empire does as well. Obviously, the tradition of deifying their rulers has ended with the Spanish conquest, but that does seem to make the most sense. So, moving on to the next two matchups, we have Lobel versus another Jacob Joseph Frank. I could say all three of those. Then we have the Nepalese kings versus Bernhard Mueller. So switching back over to the profiles. Let's begin with Lobel. Another Jewish Messiah. And one night he promised to summon the Shekinah to appear at midnight in a large gathering. Stretched across his room a perforated curtain, behind which he had secretly lighted a mixture of alcohol and turpentine. Himself, robed in white, stood behind the curtain, and the light brought out a full relief the gilt letters of the tetragrammaton which he had placed on his breast. The specters were disposed to believe in a miracle when someone present pulled down the curtain and exposed the fraud. He was excommunicated by the rabbis. So he's trying to do a magic trick. And one of the guys there was like, yeah, I understand what shadows are. You're not going to fool me. So he was, he pulled some followers from Sabbatai and claimed himself to be the Messiah. So that's kind of funny. That will play in your favor, sir. He is against Jacob Joseph Frank. Lived 1726 to 1791. Another Jewish Messiah claimed to be the reincarnation of King David, and preached a synthesis of Christianity and Judaism. Self-proclaimed Messiah, follower of Sabbatai Zevi, or a reincarnation of Sabbatai Zevi. So we're still not out of this. So he was excommunicated by the Jewish authorities in Poland. Preached heretical doctrines, including deification of himself. So not only Jewish Messiah, but also his own divinity. Claimed to be part of the Trinity. Preached purification through transgression. Really rejected religious norms. Some of his followers were obligated to transgress as many moral boundaries as possible. At his height, it claimed perhaps 50,000 followers. So that is certainly a new take, especially on the Jewish tradition. So, obligated to transgress as many moral boundaries as possible. That is certainly a new take. So we have, in our next matchup, the Nepalese kings. Actually, the beginning of a dynasty here. They were considered incarnations of Vishnu. They fall under the ruler category for the tournament. Yeah, I should also... so pink is the ruler category, yellow is the Islamic Mahdi, green is Jewish Messiah, red is the Buddha Maitreya. For reference. So you will know what category they fall in by the color. So he, in 1743, this is sort of the beginning of this dynasty, sort of following this guy who establishes the kingdom. His sons and their successors continue fighting and defeating other kingdoms, enlarging the kingdom. Faced off with the British East India Company, or one of the East India Company. It could have been the Dutch, actually. It doesn't specify here. The Shah King had been thoroughly defeated by 1815, lost 1/3 of their territory. They continued to rule, however, as absolute monarch in 1846, when the political order changed from absolute monarchy to constitutional monarchy. However, this tradition continued for, until 2008. So this is like 240 years. So that's a pretty long, pretty good tradition there. But of course, defeated by a private army. So, I don't know. The Nepalese kings face off against Bernhard Müller. We have another Jewish Messiah. So they are, what is it, like about half of the contenders have been Jewish Messiahs in this division. Proclaimed himself to be the Lion of Judah in 1829. He lived until 1834, when he died of yellow fever and or possibly cholera. So claimed to be a prophet, and he possessed the philosopher's stone. Also, called himself the Count de Leon, Archduke Maximilian von Est and Proli, whatever that is, I don't know, claimed that he and his followers were the true Philadelphians. Oh, okay, so yeah, they were, they immigrated to Pennsylvania, and they kind of hooked up with this other sect, the Harmonites, that were in Pennsylvania, and they had a custom of celibacy, and this Mueller guy was clever enough to realize that a lot of the followers did not agree with the celibacy tradition, so he was able to get a lot of them on his side, so he converted a lot of this sect into his own. And this Harmony Society ended up giving them and the people that left $105,000 as part of a settlement with the group. So, I mean, I didn't look into that in any detail. I just kind of grabbed that little headline. But that is a lot of money for that time period. Like, a lot. So that is, it's kind of an interesting detail. So this is another kind of tough matchup here. It's sort of unclear what to do. I think on this first one, though, I have to... Ooh. Yeah, I definitely have to go with this guy, with the transgress as many moral boundaries as possible with his 50,000 followers. That is definitely unique, let's say, especially in religious fanaticism. And then this one, I think, just from the money aspect, not a whole lot of followers, 250 to 300 possibly I have here. I don't have that in here. And then, of course, these guys were like defeated by capitalism, essentially. So that seems to make sense there. I am going to go with that. Looks like next up we have a Mahdi coming onto the scene. So let's see, this one was Jacob Joseph Frank and Bernhard Mueller. This one is not really sure. I think since this guy was ultimately excommunicated, I'm going to go with Bernhard Mueller again with their massive piggy bank. So we'll go with that and move on to the next two matchups, which will close out Division 3. So let's get to it. Of course, I have to try to pronounce this. Diponegoro? No idea. He hails from Java. Saw himself as the Javanese Mahdi, or Ratu Adil, prophesied by King Joyoboyo. He stood against Dutch colonialism and is now a hero of Indonesia. So his legacy extends into the current day, present day. He lived from 1785 to 1855, as you can see here. He was a charismatic leader of a rebellion, but in 1830, his army was as good as beaten. They started negotiations. He demanded to have a free state under a sultan and wanted to become the Muslim leader of a newly established caliph. He was invited to negotiate under a flag of truce. He accepted and met at the town and was promptly taken prisoner. Yeah, I mean, wow. Over and over you can see, do not trust the treaties of the colonials at all. I mean, every time they just violate their treaties. So sad, man. I mean, just the consistent history of yeah, just deceit and just straight up, man, it's sad to see over and over again, just violating the trust. But anyway, he was taken prisoner. He lived out the rest of his life in prison and in exile. But he did live a high-profile life in prison, apparently. So he does at least have that. Small consolation, but there it is. He faces off against the Bab, which I covered in the Omnism video a little bit. But he ended up being basically the founder of an entire new sect of Islam. Really its own religion at this point, called Baha'i. He was the predecessor of Baha'u'llah. Also, apparently this, you're not supposed to show his picture. Of course, it is right here, as you can see. So, I guess, I don't avert your eyes if you find this offensive, because it is already on screen, and I've already showcased his picture a number of times on my channel, so this is going to be no different. His followers, known as Babis, I guess, babies, I don't know, claimed to be the Mahdi on May 24th, 1844. Yeah, so as you get into more current times, we actually have specific dates, like down to the day. He gave some famous speech, and they have, that area is like revered by the Baha'is and the Babis. Of course, he was not accepted by the Islamic leaders at the time. He was executed by firing squad in the town of Tabriz. His remains are currently kept in the tomb of the... Yeah, so that... he has a pretty... it's... I think it's a pilgrimage itself, but it's a huge complex. Manicured gardens, these big, awesome, whatever, marble tombs, and it's just this huge complex. And again, I showcased that in the Omnism video. Like I said, he's considered the forerunner to Baha'u'llah. The declaration by the Bab to be the Mahdi is considered by Baha'is to be the beginning of the Baha'i calendar. So, of course, in keeping with the religious traditions of many faiths, they have to have their own calendar even. So they are defining time in their own way. Because you can't follow the Christian calendar or the Jewish calendar. You gotta make your own, because you have your own tradition. It's just yeah, like I said, it's just a sort of a religious manifestation. Is to establish your own time. Where are we at? I'm not even sure. So we have, Muhammad Ahmed versus Liu Zhongyi. That sounds suspiciously like another Buddha is about to enter the tournament. But we will see. We will see if that's just a stereotype or not. Muhammad Ahmed declared himself Mahdi, as you do. In June 1881, went on to lead a successful military campaign. Yeah, so it seems like a lot of these guys seem to want to establish their own legacy, mostly through military expeditions. Kind of seems to be a running theme, if you hadn't noticed. So he did end up capturing the capital of Sudan in 1885. The Mahdis state continued under his successor until 1898, when it fell to British rule. So a short-lived state, but he did establish a state. Whoops. Lost control of the profiles. Proclamation came during a period of widespread resentment among the population towards the oppressive policies of the current Turco-Egyptian rulers. So he found some support among the locals and the Sudanese religious sects at the time, so that probably played into some of his early success. But as I said, it was a very short-lived Islamic state. And yes, so I was right. We do have another Buddhist, Buddha Maitreya, 17th patriarch of the Icon Dao. The followers believe that he is the first leader of the White Sun era of the apocalypse. So we have apocalypticism in Buddhist traditions here. This would have been 1849 to 1925 time period. So 1895, at the age of 46, he claimed to have a dream from God instructing him to become a student of this other Buddhist patriarch. So up until that time, he was not like a Buddhist student. So he died on the second day of the second lunar month in 1925, and his younger sister, Lu Zongji, also known as the Mistress of the Old Cave, that's not very flattering, who is believed to be the incarnation of Bodhisattva Guan Yin, took over the leadership for 6 years. So yeah, that's not bad. He does have a successor, who was a female ruler, which is not entirely common, especially in the old, historically. Although it did happen, we have examples of in Carthage, in Egyptian history, Chinese history, so it does happen. So 7 major disciples of Lu, once refused his succession, officially was bestowed the leadership as the 18th patriarch of Yuguan Dao in Jinan. So, I don't know, not a whole lot of detailed information on his life and his rule. So, compare that to the previous guy. Yeah, they're actually sort of similar. But I guess I will I will go with Muhammad Ahmed, since he it did establish a state, even though it was short-lived, and he did claim to be the Mahdi. Both of those things, especially occurring at once, have been pretty rare in Islamic history. Usually the people who claim to be Mahdi are, persecuted or excommunicated, because that is actually heretical in the Muslim tradition. So I think the fact that he made those claims and then made it so far kind of raises his profile a bit. Now we have the Bab versus Diponegoro. This is another difficult one. And I didn't point out we have a string of Mahdis here. Difficult. But I think since this guy ended up being the predecessor to an entire, essentially what has become its own religion, I think I'm going to give that first one to the Bab, and then I will give this second one to Muhammad Ahmed. So let's do that. And then, of course, since the Bab ended up having the bigger and longer lasting legacy, I'm going to go with him over Muhammad Ahmed. So that brings us to the final couple matchups here. And I think actually it's pretty clear here that the Bab is going to be over Bernhard Mueller. Even though he does have a large bank account, I think the following in what ended up becoming the Baha'i faith, and even Babism is its own sect still to this day, I think that makes the most sense there. And that honestly is actually true in this matchup as well. So I do think I will have to give this to the Bab over the Incan emperors. Like I said, I am kind of biased toward the Incans. I do plan on doing a sort of a deep dive video on that empire at a later time. But unfortunately, historically, I'm going to have to go with the Bab in this matchup. So that brings us to the end of Division 3, or yes, it does. So we have the Bab in the Final Four, as you can see here. So he makes it to the finals. Let me zoom out just a little bit. Let me just zoom out all the way so we can see where we are at. So there you go. As I explained earlier, Muhammad is already in, and this is the original Muhammad. I know a lot of these Mahdis, they end up changing their name or adding the Muhammad name to change their name to Muhammad, or however it works. But this is the original Muhammad in the Final Four. So he awaits the end of Division 1. We have the Bab waiting for the end of Division 4, which is coming up next. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you will tune in. All right, bye now. There's lots of other videos to watch, so join me, subscribe, like the videos you like, share the videos you love, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and as always, thank you. You are the fuel to the fire.